Hi friends, I'm Jae Sinnett, and I want to talk with you today about funk, but old school funk, like the roots of funk, and even to a degree, kind of the roots to hip hop. And I want to show you a couple of rhythms. And funk pretty much started in the 60s with James Brown. And I mean, there were some things that you know, in the peripheral around that coming out of the 50s that we can kind of label close to funk. But modern funk really started in the 60s with James Brown and his emphasis on the down one beat. And that can't be downplayed, because the significance of that makes all the difference in the world, and understanding it. The importance of that one down beat. Right? The one beat. So I want to show you two different rhythms. One that's pretty much associated with hip hop, particularly early hip hop. And I'll use my smaller snare over here. And a couple of things, well, a few things in this. There are different variations that you can use with the hi-hat. There are different variations you can use with the bass drum, different variations with the snare drum. The middle of the head of the drum, closer to the rim of the drum, which will give you a little bit more ring, which is actually pretty cool, depending on what you're playing, of course. So the middle, ring, or open and close the hi-hat, placement, accents, and grace notes. Grace notes are really important here. So let's show you one of these hip-hop type rhythms that's kind of like the foundation of it, man. And the way you get there is just take your time, and it's really all about feel. You know, it's not technique driven, although you have to have a level of technique to be able to articulate the ideas, but it's really the most important thing is your feel and your time, how you can make this groove feel, and your dynamic ranges too, you know, particularly between your grace notes. So let's look at this one little hip hop rhythm, and I'll start it off. Okay, you hear the grace notes, then the strong notes. Strong notes on beats 2 and 4. I'll do a straight 8th note for right now. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's important to feel where those grace notes are falling on these 16th notes. He's like 3, 4. And there's kind of an elasticity in that groove. They're kind of swung. Now I'm going to add some bass drum. 3, 4. Now I'm going to add some open and close to the hi-hat. 3, 4. Pick it up. Add a little bit more, a couple of more 16th notes on the hi-hat. Add a little bit more 16th notes on the bass drum. of the snare drum to get a little bit more of that ring. 3. Feel that? And you can feel all that as opposed to straight. It swung. Okay, so that's one of these rhythms that comes closer to a hip-hop funk kind of conception. And it's kind of the roots of that, man. So the important thing to remember are the articulation of your grace notes, your dynamic variation in your snare beat, the down one beat, understanding that elasticity in that groove. So you put a little swing element in there because, you know, it's not far from swing. You play this groove. Now we go to the jazz swing. See that connection? And that's why a lot of some of the better, more musically inclined hip-hop is making connections to jazz because of that elasticity in that rhythm. It's really, there's a swing element into that rhythm. So to find out where that came from, you have to go back to James Brown, again with Clyde Stubblefield and Jabo Starks, because here was kind of a rhythm that kind of started it all, man. And it's about touch, finesse, repetition. That's important. And that, again, that one downbeat. So kind of reminiscent of Clyde Stubblefield, that funk coming out of the 60s. I'll just use straight 8 notes for right now. Now I'll add some bass drum, and it'll start to come together. Add more to it. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of that. And Now I'll start adding a little bit more 16th notes on the hi-hat, and maybe start to open and close it on some spots. Get a little bit more active on the bass drum. 3, 4. Feel that? Versus two different ways to open and close that hi-hat. Straighter. Now to get a little advanced with it, but keeping the same concept in mind. Okay, so all these variations on that, but the roots of it and remember these grace notes and then your strong notes. Make sure you have good definition between the two. And this type of funk, it wasn't a power game because these guys didn't play loud, and a lot of times Clyde would play with the beat of the stick on the hi-hat. Hear the difference in that bead versus this part of the stick? All right. And remember the areas of the snare drum closer to the rim, you get a little bit more of that ring, which is kind of hip from modern day. So a little bit of some funk demonstrations from the old school, right? Some old school funk coming out of the 60s and some of the roots of, the hip hop sound. So again, the keys to playing these grooves effectively, your time. You have to have really good time, okay? Good dynamic ranges. You have to understand the dynamic ranges between your grace notes and your strong notes. Your strong notes are usually falling on 2 and 4, and then the 1 beat with the bass drum. Got to have that 1 beat. So the strong down 1 beat has to be in place. It has to keep coming back around. It's not a power game. It's a finesse game. All right? And remember that elasticity. All right, touch, finesse, elasticity, dynamic ranges and textures. If you're playing loud all the time, then you have nowhere to go. It just stays, and then it becomes like almost, it's not very musical, put it that way. So put some variation, some dynamic variation. It creates a forward moving quality in your grooves. And work on your time constantly. Always work on your time. Work on your feel, the touch. Use some variations, open and close with the hi-hats, different, sticking techniques in how you open and close. Some bass drum variation, but remember also, lastly, leave yourself some space in the groove between the beats, because that's what's going to really stick with the ears. You leave yourself some space between these beats, and it gives people time to really hear what you're doing. And most importantly, feel what you're doing. Boom, repetition is important in this kind of playing. It really is. So I hope you got something out of this brief lesson in classic funk grooves. I'm Jae Sinnett. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again really soon. Thank you.